Welcome to the August 21st, 2014 City Council of Murfreesboro meeting, and Mr. Rick LaLance has our prayer and our pledge.
Dear God, thank you for all the blessings, and thank you for today. God, I hope that you'll guide our judgment and be with us tonight. As always, be with the military, be with our friends and family, and be with the citizens. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's good to see everyone tonight, and I'm going to catch our city manager off guard, but we started a big process with Murfreesboro for the future of Murfreesboro this week, and we just had a joint meeting of our Planning Commission and City Council. And Mr. Lyons, just for you to give a brief update on where we are and what we've done so far this week.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I'd be glad to. We have had a very busy and full week on the city's comprehensive plan. It began on Tuesday with a meeting of the Comprehensive Plan Task Force. The task force will be a sounding board for the consultant in this process to review information. So they had their kickoff meeting, were introduced to the process of the comprehensive plan. On Wednesday, we had over 200 Murfreesboro residents that joined us at World Outreach Church for a community kickoff. Their residents had an opportunity to visit a couple stations to talk to us about quality of life, our growth capacity, and development issues. So we were certainly excited about the amount of residents who are already plugging into that process. And then tonight at 5 o'clock, we had a joint workshop with the Planning Commission and City Council. After the comprehensive plan runs its course in the next 18 to 24 months, it'll be the Planning Commission that will ultimately have to review and approve it, and then on to the City Council for review and approval. And, Mayor, one of the things that we've heard all week is the importance of community engagement and citizen involvement. And so this process is set up to give residents many opportunities to participate. We have everything from the big community come one, come all meetings like we had last night, where people can come and interact and talk to the consultant directly, to small focus groups, to one-on-one meetings, and then we're really going to take advantage of the use of technology. There's a website called MindMixer that'll be available to residents at Murfreesboro2035.com that they can get online and share ideas and share projects and help us create a vision and a roadmap for Murfreesboro for the next 20 years. So we're just getting started. As the consultant said, we've been in park and now we're putting it into drive, and so we're excited about where we're heading.
And I think with the MindMixer, we may have, sound like a TV station, we may have a few technical difficulties that we're working through. So if you do log on and you're a Safari user or an iPhone user right now, have a few opportunities we're working on.
A little bit of a glitch right now, but Kendi Keast, our consultant, had talked to the president of MindMixer today, so we've gone right to the top. We're going to get this fixed right away.
All right, council members, y'all have anything you want to add? All right. Thank you for that update. We'll move to our consent agenda.
Mayor, I might add on my item F, which is the VA fire service contract. I did have a typo in my letter. While the contract's correct, the monthly amount should be $76,761 per month. I had a slight typo in there.
Okay. All right. Any questions?
No questions, Mayor. I move for adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right. Mr. Gilley and Mr. LaLance. Ms. Wright, you'll call the roll.
Mr. Gilley.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move to the minutes of the August 7th, 2014 public comment meeting and also of our regular meeting.
No adjustments. I'll move to pass.
Second.
All right, Mr. LaLance, Ms. Gels Harris. Ms. Wright, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Gilley.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Consider for passage on second reading ordinance 140823 to annex an area located along Old Fort Parkway, Franklin Road, and to adopt for the same a plan of services.
Mayor, may I call Mr. Adelot to the podium and ask him questions about this, please?
Absolutely. Mr. Adelot. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you.
Sir, it's my understanding that there was going to be some restrictions, covenants put on this property by maybe the landowner and maybe the church for their property next door. Where are we on that?
To the best of my knowledge, we are nowhere at this point. Early on, there was some discussion about that possibility. The property owner, through their agent, Mr. Bratcher, had communicated that. Mr. Bratcher was, at that point, involved as the agent for the applicants. Subsequently, I think he was no longer involved, and maybe anything he was involved with is no longer the case. The applicants are present tonight. They're the couple in the three in the back row over there, if you had questions about that. But I think that at this point there has been no indication that either party is ready to adopt restrictions. It has not been communicated to me clearly that either would be willing to do that at this point. There was some discussion about a concern that were the applicants to adopt restrictions and then the church were to subsequently sell their property, they would be left with restrictions that the adjacent property would not have. And there was maybe an interest on her part that her property be restricted or the property adjacent to her be restricted in a similar manner so that she would not be vulnerable to that a change of circumstance.
I think my understanding was that they were both going to put some restrictions on this property.
I'm not sure at the end of the day exactly what the understanding was, Mr. Young. I quite simply have not been involved in any negotiations, so I couldn't speak with certainty as to what that might have been.
Ms. Buchanan, can we let the applicant speak, or?
Yeah, the council has the ability to waive its rules to allow that to happen. Yes, sir.
Mayor, I think the only way we're going to get the answer is to let the applicant speak, so I would move that we waive the rules and let the applicant speak.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright, would you call the roll?
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me come to help clarify this application. And I did contact my mother's attorney, Mr. Larry Talbert. Unfortunately, he had already planned for a vacation at this time, but he asked us to go ahead and press on with this. He said there would be no need for us to delay it any longer. My mother's attorney contacted Franklin Road, and I think they have a spokesman here tonight, so I don't feel like I'm, talking out of school about, anything that they can't clear up and verify. And did ask them about, we did talk to them, Mr. Talbert spoke with them about some restrictions. They said they would have to get back on that. And the last communication that I had with Mr. Talbert was that Franklin Road did not get back with him. Now, I have not talked to him this week because he's been on the vacation. But they were still, Franklin Road did not want this zoned commercial highway. That was the bottom line he gave to me in my email. So I respectfully ask the council to press forward with this annexation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, could I also ask, so that we get both sides of the story in fairness, that we allow the representative from the church to speak as well?
Is that the form of a motion?
In the form of a motion, yes.
Second.
Ms. Wright, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Do we have a representative for Franklin Road? Okay.
I want to thank the mayor and the council for just the chance to get to speak. We did receive a phone call from Attorney Talbert, as Mrs. Richardson said. And in that phone conversation, my business manager was present. And I told him, of course, I can't make that decision. I'm just the pastor. We work through, of course, our board of deacons and then also through the church. This particular thing is not covered under our Constitution where we have to take it to the church. So therefore, I told Mr. Talbert that I would assemble our deacons, which is our trustee board as well, let them make the decision on it. I told him on the phone then But I would see no reason why we wouldn't want to restrict our property in the same fashion, because, first of all, it's not for sale, but secondly, we have no plans. If we ever did sell it, we would not want to have maybe some of the potential alcohol outlets and so forth there as well. So I told him verbally on the phone we would have no problem doing that, but I would have to officially get back with him. So it took me about a week or so to assemble all the men to be able to get that particular vote. We have that vote on record that we agreed that we would be willing to restrict our property. Now, of course, I immediately called the attorney back. He was out of the office. His secretary gave me his voicemail. I asked her, I said, does he check his voicemail? And she said, yes, he does. And so I did inform him by voicemail on his office phone that we did agree to those restrictions. However, again, we're still verbal, and so we've contacted our attorney so that he can help write the restrictions. He informed me, my attorney informed me to call Mr. Talbert back and let him know that they wanted to get together by phone conversation so he would know how to write those restrictions. And of course, the attorney is out of town, and so that's where the backlog is at this point. But just let the council know that we are willing to restrict our property in the same fashion, which is the only issue with us. And we, of course, defer to the will of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Norris. Okay. Would you like to say anything else?
I thank Pastor Norris for attending and clearing that up. I would still respectfully like to ask the council to go ahead and vote on this without any restrictions, and zone annexation into the city and zone commercial highway. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so folks, will consider for passage on second reading ordinance 140823 to annex an area located along Old Fort Parkway, Franklin Road, and to adopt for same plan of services. And this is for the annexation.
Mayor, I move approval for the annexation.
You have a motion.
Okay, with no second. I move for deferral until the attorneys can get together and work out the situation.
Well, I don't think we can.
Can I do that?
I think, Ms. McGinn, I'll defer to you.
I would suggest that you move to defer and ask the consent of the applicant for deferral. In the absence of consent of the applicant, I would suggest we need to make sure we're timely in this. I think would be the first on that.
I think the applicant was telling the council that they would like to proceed. What I heard, that they wanted to proceed with, they wanted the council to do something. So
there's one question I have.
Sure.
I think the applicant said the last time, I'm not even sure she was all that excited about deferring last time. It sounds like she certainly does not want to defer now and has been advised by her attorney not to press on, as she said, not to defer it. The question that I kind of still have in my mind as it relates to the annexation is, does it need to be both? Can you, if you don't want to do the rezoning, do you still want the annexation, or vice versa? Are they together? Is that
Ms. McGann? The question, since this is second reading, could the council pass the annexation on second reading and then make a decision on? The council would independently make a decision on the zoning.
Yeah, each issue, the annexation issue is separate from the zoning issue. As the council members will recall, we have interim zoning when something is annexed and there hasn't been agreement on a zoning plan. So if it should come to that after third and final reading, but certainly you can separate passage on the two. Annexation means that the land, would be within the city's jurisdiction.
My question, I guess, really is from the applicant's standpoint. I don't know that we ever got an answer. Or I'm not clear on whether or not the applicant would like to be
annexed
is it
if not
right?
zoning is
That's
not
right,
as
or vice
requested.
versa. I mean, if we voted, I don't want to. I don't know what the applicant wants, so I'm not clear on it. Can we? Is that?
I think
Would you-
the waiver of the rules would still be in place if you want to
Okay.
ask the applicant that question.
Is that a?
Yes,
yeah, I
ma'am.
mean,
Fair question.
Mr. Rich, I guess the question is, if you, hypothetically, with what the council is going to do you want one or the other? Do you want
Mayor
both?
McFarland, I don't want to waste the council's time or that of my own if the council is not going to consider this at this commercial highway level, because it won't really make the property more saleable if it's just annexed into the city without, if I has to keep it residential.
Okay.
Mayor
So-
McFarland.
So you
it's-
don't want the annexation without the zoning?
Why would I want to just increase my taxes if I'm not able to do with anything else with it?
Now, there's benefits that come to being in the city, whether you're residential or commercial, but
Really?
So, Ms. McGannon, I guess the question would be, since we don't know, that's the next issue, if hypothetically that it passes or fails on the zoning, then we would have the third reading to not do the annexation. Is it? We still have third reading on the
You still
annexation.
have third reading. You could vote on both the annexation and the zoning, and then vote not to do either if you were not happy or the applicant withdrew the request before third and final reading.
But if the annexation does not pass, then the zoning would not.
You would need to take a separate vote
Okay.
on it.
Ms. McGannon, could we vote on the zoning prior to voting on annexation?
Sure you can. That was,
Can we just reverse the order of
You
these
can.
two items?
You can certainly. Obviously,
Mayor.
zoning doesn't take effect on something that's not in the city, but as a procedural matter, you can flip the order.
Okay.
Mayor, my intent was to annex the property tonight, have a 2-week deferral until Mr. Talbert can get back and get with their attorney and determine if they work out restrictions or not. I have no intention of denying her right for annexation or denying her right for commercial highway. In my mind, there was a misconception about restrictions that she might want to put on the property and that the church might want to put on the property. And that was my motive to do that, to clear those up.
Do you want any restrictions on the property? I got the impression that you don't.
I was willing to to agree with Franklin Road if they had a fear that we were going to try to put an establishment in there or sell to someone. I'm not here to harm the church, Mr. Smotherman, but now the church does not want us to be zoned commercial highway. So what am I to do? I'm not in this. I don't want to play a chess game with Franklin Road. I'm trying to fulfill my mother's will by selling the property. That's all I'm here for. I offered up to do this, and it was like, the last thing that I was told is, we'll get back to you. And I respectfully want Franklin Road to know, I had Mr. Talbert, I said, I want you to wait 10 business days and then give them a chance to reply, because I do know Pastor Norris has pointed out to me, he doesn't just make the rules over there. This has to go before a board of deacons and things. It takes time to get things like that done. And I told him, I said, you need to give him 10 working business days to reply to us. And that didn't not happen, Pastor Norris. I'm just telling you what was told to me. But this has been going on now for since I talked to Pastor Norris last year about the contract. It's been going on for Mr. Smotherman another year. And we're still
And I want us to do
At
the
point
will of
zero.
the applicant. And do you want us to vote on this tonight?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I would make them, well, do you already have a motion?
No, my motion died for lack of second.
So, Ms. McGann, would it be possible if we, instead of voting on the annexation, we just moved, if it's what the council wants, just to move to item 4 first and vote on the zoning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're going to skip item 3, and we're going to move to item 4, consider for passage on second reading ordinance 14 OZ 24 to zone an area located along Old Fort Parkway, Franklin Road as highway commercial CH district, simultaneous with annexation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just so we'll vote as the applicant has requested, I will move that we make the motion that we vote.
Okay.
Does that motion need to be in form of denial or?
Yeah, we're,
Well, I took it as a vote to approve
Yeah.
the zoning requested.
yeah, we're all,
Is that your
we're,
intent?
It will be a,
There's no need to vote
Yeah, we're-
on whether or not to vote.
we're
The
considering-
vote is for the request or against the request.
yeah.
will it die for lack of a motion in a second and fail, if that be the case, if we don't have a motion? Or do we need to vote on it, I guess?
You got to have a motion.
If a motion is made and fails for lack of a second, the floor would be open for another motion. And just because the applicant may not wish deferral would not keep a member of the council from making a motion to defer.
Even though you advise us to seek that consent.
I advise that because it's always best to have that.
Got it.
I'll make a motion.
So if you move for passage, does that necessarily mean that you are voting to pass it?
No.
Got it.
I would make a motion that we move for passage.
Have a motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Okay, so we have a motion to pass the zoning. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. Gilly?
No.
Ms. Gels Harris?
No.
Mr. LaLance?
No.
Mr. Smotherman?
No.
Mr. Washington? No. Vice Mayor Young?
No.
Mayor McFarland?
No. Okay, we'll now move to item 3. We'll go back to consider for passage on second reading an ordinance 140823 to annex an area located along Old Fort Parkway, Franklin Road, and to adopt for same a plan of services.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. Have a second. Any discussion?
And I think it's the request that we not do this for the applicant if we had turned down the most previous one. So
Okay.
I'll just say on the front side that even though we're making the motion, that I'll be voting no.
Wouldn't it have been easier to make a motion to deny? All right, Ms. Wright, you'll call the roll.
Mayor?
Yes.
Please clarify the motion.
The motion is to pass the zoning, to pass the annexation. And I just asked Mr. Gilly, Ms. McGann, I may be putting my dunce hat on, but what would have been the difference to make a motion for denial? It would have been the same thing, correct?
Yeah, you could.
Okay. All right. All right, so we're voting to pass the annexation. Ms. Wright, you'll call the roll.
Mr. Gilly?
No.
Ms. Gels Harris?
No.
Mr. LaLance?
No.
Mr. Smotherman?
No.
Mr. Washington? No. Vice Mayor Young?
No.
Mayor McFarland?
No. Okay, we'll move to item 5. Consider for passage on second reading ordinance 14042, authorizing the charging and collection of electronic traffic citations fees pursuant to Chapter 750 of the Public Acts 2014.
Move for passage.
All right, Mr. Smotherman, Mr. Washington, Ms. Wright, you'll call the roll.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington? Vice Mayor Young?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. Okay, we'll go to first readings, and we'll hear from Robert Mitchell, Rutherford County Assessor, regarding a change in the certified tax rate.
Mayor, I have not seen Mr. Mitchell, but I can try to explain this item if that would be okay.
Sure.
The city, each time we've had a reappraisal, gets a certified tax rate. The certified tax rate generates the same amount of revenue as the prior tax rate, excluding growth. So in 2002, 2006, 2010, we adopted the certified tax rate, and we received a certified tax rate during the preparation of the budget this year of $1.2015 for our certified tax rate, $1.20 and change. After adoption, after third and final reading of ordinance 14034, and after July 1st, the start of the fiscal year, we were notified by the Rutherford County assessor and the state of Tennessee that a correction needed to occur in the city's certified tax rate. So the certified tax rate they gave us was 1.2066, or $1.20 and a little bit more change. Again, this would generate, it's the corrected certified tax rate. So Ms. McGannon has prepared a ordinance for you that would correct that certified tax rate. It's ordinance 14044, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions from the council?
Move for approval.
Mr. Young, Mr. Washington. Ms. Wright, will please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington. Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Okay, we'll move to new business. 7A, pursuant to Resolution 1404R43, adopted by the City Council on July 24, 2014, conduct a public hearing to consider amending Chapter 25 and a quarter, signs, Sections 25 and a quarter-22 and 25 and a quarter-26, dealing with signs. Planning staff applicant 2014-804. Notice of said public hearing was published in the August 4th, 2014 edition of a local newspaper. Ms. Kerr, good to see you.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland, members of council. Tonight we have two proposed ordinance amendments to the City of Murfreesboro sign ordinance. The first proposed amendment modifies how the display area of a sign is calculated and will apply to all attached signs within the City of Murfreesboro. Currently, if a sign is placed on an internally illuminated surface, the entire illuminated area is included in the calculation of the square footage of a sign. The proposed amendment will allow the applicant to only calculate the area of the sign attached to the window, wall, or any other surface not specifically designed to serve as a background for the sign and are not enclosed by a box or an outline as the display surface area of the sign, whether it is illuminated or non-illuminated. The second proposed amendment will be for a single tenant building on a single lot with buildings within the GDO 1, 2, 3, and 4, PUD, PID, and PCD districts. Currently, we have 4 commercial industrial zoning districts for signage within the city, and all have varying size restrictions of signage based on linear frontage of tenant building frontage and distance from the building to the road, and overall aggregate square footage of signage on a building, and a limited number of signs per building. This proposed amendment will eliminate the limitation on the number of signs allowed on a building. For a tenant, it will allow up to 1 square foot for each linear foot of exterior wall to which the sign will be attached, or 50 square feet, whichever is greater. Our expectations with this proposed amendment is to reduce confusion by simplifying the sign ordinance for staff, sign companies, business owners, and the general public. Increasing the amount of signage will allow for larger tenant buildings who are currently at a disadvantage with the current sign ordinance and still allow medium and small size tenants adequate signage. And this will also allow staff time to further analyze the size approach for the unintended consequences and hopefully determine if this would be acceptable for all 4 commercial industrial zoning districts within the City of Murfreesboro. And I'm available as well as staff to answer any questions that you might have.
Mayor, we think these are very much friendly to small business. These are changes we think that simplify our approach to signage and I think should be welcomed by our small businesses.
Mr. Kerr, I think it'd be good if you don't mind the combined display surface area of all tenant attached signs shall not exceed 1 square foot for each foot of linear foot on an exterior wall. So if you had an interior or an area that you had a leased space that was 50 square feet.
50 linear feet?
50 linear feet of frontage.
They would get 50 square foot of signage and an unlimited number of signs. Sometimes tenants want 2 or 3 signs on the front of the building, and they're limited to 1 right now if they're in a multi-tenant setting in the center of the space. And they might want, a big sign and then 2 small signs to advertise their product of some sort on there. So they would still only get 50 square foot of signage based on the linear frontage of their building. But it would also give them the opportunity, if they are visible from 2 road frontages, such as where AT&T is on Old Fort Parkway and Mall Circle Boulevard, if they want a sign on the back side of the building, they can also put a sign on the back side of the building, where currently they're not allowed to do that.
Awesome. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you for working so hard on this.
If no further questions or comments,
Yeah, we got to do a public hearing. Yeah.
sorry, Mayor.
All right. If no one has questions, we'll open the public hearing. And rules that we have for public hearings: please come to the podium, state your name and address. Ask you to speak no more than 3 minutes unless you're a spokesperson for a group. Please address all comments to the council, and at the end of the hearing, we'll attempt to answer any and all of the questions. And each person will only be allowed to speak once. So we'll call the public hearing. It's now open. Anyone? All right. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 14043, amending Murfreesboro City Code, Chapter 25 1/4 signs, Sections 25 1/4-22 and 25 1/4-26, dealing with signs.
So moved.
That was just mean, Doug. That was just mean. All right, Mr. Councilman Young. Ms. Scales-Harris.
He didn't even realize.
No. All right, any discussion?
I'm trying to read this pad over here.
Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels-Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Number 8, we'll hear from the city attorney with regards to guns on greenways.
Mayor and council, some meetings ago, Councilman Smotherman asked me to advise you whether or not the city council could allow citizens to carry firearms on the city's greenways while maintaining the city's position prohibiting such carrying in city parks. And I have researched that, and you have a copy of my analysis together with the state statutes in your packet. And one of the reasons it took a while was because there was some legislation passed in the last session of the General Assembly that on its face purported to preempt the whole field of the regulation of firearms to the exclusion of all city ordinances and resolutions. And I was concerned what that might have done to the city's ability under the another statute which allowed the prohibition in parks. This is an area that is not totally clear when you listen to the legislative history because different persons spoke about the bill in a different way. However, the fact that Chapter 822 of the Public Act says, except as otherwise provided by state law, preemption occurs, and does not expressly repeal the provisions that deal with parks and greenways. It's my opinion that at this time the council would be able to exercise the provisions in 3917 1311D. I gave a copy of that legislation to you, and let me just sort of recap what that statute does. It says in subsection A that there is a prohibition against carrying open or concealed any weapon within a park, and then has a number of exceptions to that. One of the exceptions, i.e. carrying a weapon that would be allowed, is in subsection B1H, which allows people who have a carry permit to be in a park. And then there is a further exception which says unless the city council has by resolution prohibited persons with a carry permit from carrying in a public park. And it was that provision that this city council had previously exercised to conduct, to prohibit persons with carry permits in parks. However, there is also another provision in that section that allows, in my opinion, the council to consider greenways separately from parks. Subdivision G contains a definition of a greenway, which would seem applicable to the types of greenways that we have here in Murfreesboro, and says that the greenway shall be considered a portion of the park unless otherwise designated by the local legislative body. So that seemingly suggests that a local legislative body can say a greenway that connects to a park or goes through a park is not a park for purposes of the prohibition against persons with carry permits. So it seemingly indicates that a distinction can be drawn between the language in D, which says if you're going to prohibit the possession of handguns within a park, the prohibition shall apply to the entire park. Okay, so on the one hand it's saying if you're doing it, it's the entire park. But then the other part down in G says greenways can be, are considered a portion of the park unless designated otherwise. So it seemingly indicates that the council has the ability to designate otherwise and say a greenway is not a part of the park for part of the prohibition against carrying handguns in city parks. While the reasoning and it's a little if this then that, it's rather convoluted, but my best judgment is, and I think you all know I am not a criminal lawyer, I have not conducted criminal practice, and this is a criminal statute, but my best reading of it is that this council would have the ability to draw a distinction between its greenways and to say that they are not subject to the prohibition you have put in place against disallowing persons who have carry permits to be in your parks. Because the language of the statute is very clear about designation otherwise, I suggested to you in the final section of my opinion that any action that the council might wish to take in this area would need to be carefully drawn with specificity and with maps rather than a general statement, because I think that would be necessary to make a clear designation, because we have greenways that go through parks, go to parks and trailheads and whatnot. So my belief is that should the council wish to do so, it can at this time, but that it should do so with specificity in its designation, and that it would need to do so by resolution rather than just a simple vote.
Okay.
I would be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. McGann, thanks for all the hard work, and I know you put a lot of time into this, and reading through everything, the only comment I would want to make is, we have, as a council, over the last many months, from open mic sessions to even last night to inviting the citizens to come in to get citizen input, I look at this and, we have mechanisms in place where we have a Greenway Committee that has not seen this, a Parks and Recreation Commission that has not seen this, and I think, just my opinion, that, in those citizen groups deserve to be able to look at that, and especially when we're talking about drawing maps and different things. So that's just my comment on our own reading of a two-page summary. So, Mr. Lance?
Well, I'm just curious, how I don't really know how that map gets drawn, what the process is for that. Maybe that's the way, maybe that's the best way. I don't know the to have the Greenway Committee start that process, and then we tweak it, or, the Greenway, or then the Parks and Rec, and, that may be the best process for that. I'm just kind of lost as to how that works, I guess, and
Well, as when you had the issues with the airport come to you, either staff or your public board would come to you with a recommendation, and you would accept it, reject it, or modify it. So we hadn't had to do map drawing on this issue before, because when the council considered it before, it was as a whole thing. But generally, any kind of planning document where you're designating particular areas, just like annexations and zoning, staff will come with information to your board, and your board will say, this is what we think, and send it to you with a recommendation. So there isn't any exact history, but that would be the closest comparison I would suggest.
Okay.
Ms. Gels Harris.
So when we're talking about drawing maps, we're talking about on the Greenway, certain areas of the Greenway you can carry a gun, certain areas you cannot.
Yeah, I think that sort of question assumes two parts. If you wanted to send it to either or both of those committees, you'd say, what is your opinion of whether we should do this or not? And tell us, in addition to your opinion, tell us where you think the Greenway stops and starts for these purposes. As I understand it from speaking with the member Parks and Recreation, staff, we've got greenways that are going through parks, truly traversing through a park, and those that sort of are just adjacent. And so looking at the maps to figure where you would want to say this is the park. For example, not a personal opinion, but just as an example, we don't want guns on the Greenway where it goes next to Kids Castle. Might be something that came back to you, whereas we think guns on the Greenway that is going to be built out near Walter Hill would be important. That is a sample of kind of feedback you might get if you sent them that question and asked them for feedback.
And no disrespect or anything to you, Ms. McGanna, the comment I'm going to make, I think it just doesn't make sense to me that we have 13 miles of Greenway, and we're going to say we can have guns in this part and not guns in that part. I mean, what are we going to have if we decide to do that? Are we going to have a sign, guns permitted the next 2 miles? Then you see another sign, no guns. I mean, what do? You hide your gun in this part and keep going? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Either we're going to have guns on the Greenway or we're not. Drawing these lines to me is just, it just does not make sense. I mean, why should we draw lines where either we're going to have guns on the Greenway or we're not?
But the issue to suggest you need to do it is to draw the distinction between is this the Greenway or is this the park? We've got greenways running through parks. The council could say we're going to allow guns in all parks and greenways, and then the issue doesn't come up. If you're going to say we're going to allow them on the greenways, you need to clearly designate what greenway you're talking about when you have greenways that run through parks.
And that's the point I'm making. We have 13 miles of Greenway. So whether it's going through a park or not, we're talking about a Greenway with 13 miles. Either we're going to have guns on the Greenway or we're not going to have guns on the Greenway. We have 13 miles, guys, of Greenway. Whether it's going through a park or ocean or whatever, we have 13 miles here we're talking about. Either we're going to have guns or we're not going to have guns. I don't think we should waste the Parks and Rec's time. I don't think whatever the other department, we shouldn't waste their time drawing lines. We're talking about 13 miles of Greenway. We have to make a decision whether we're going to have guns or not.
I would like to see us pursue the greenways past themselves, not going into park areas, which we would know that the Kids Castle and we can draw the map after we come up with a decision whether or not we're going to permit it, because I don't want us to waste a whole lot of time trying to decide where the lines are drawn. If we're not going to
Right.
do anything with it, let's don't waste anybody's time. But as far as trailheads and greenway path, I would like to see persons with handgun carry permits permitted to carry their guns. Truth is, it's happening today. They're already there. The reality of it is they're concealed weapons. You don't know they're there. We're not frisking everybody who goes down the path, and therefore we don't know how many guns there are on the greenway system currently. But we do know that anyone who has one is in violation of the law. Now, what I'm trying to do is clarify that so that the people who have handgun carry permits, and it is irrelevant completely to me as to whether or not there were 100 crimes on the pathway last year or 2 crimes on the pathway or no crimes. I think as citizens of this country, we have the right to have a gun under our bed if we like to have one there for personal protection, whether your house has ever been broke into or whether you have ever had a murder in your house or whether your house has been completely safe up until this point. Responsible handgun owners who are trained to use their handguns properly are not going to be a problem walking down our greenway system carrying their handgun in a concealed manner. I think that anyone who has a handgun carry permit, which I do, has been trained, they understand, they have taken tests, they have had background checks done, and I think that the only line that we need to draw is where we have cutoffs that leave what I'm calling the greenway path and go into what we would consider a competitive park area or a playground area. When you leave that path and go into those areas, then you're going into a park, and that would be off limits. But that would be nothing more than the designation of a sign saying this is a gun-safe zone or a gun-free zone, which responsible gun owners may observe, criminals will not. But certainly, I think that we would be better off to go ahead and vote and decide whether or not we're going to allow it. If we're not going to allow it, let's don't waste any time on it. If we're going to allow it, then we can decide where the map needs to be drawn and where the lines need to be drawn. And I would leave that up to staff to determine which areas are appropriate and which areas they deem inappropriate outside the greenway path and outside the trailhead.
Toby.
I agree with absolutely everything that Councilman Smotherman just said. I'm a long-distance runner, and I have ran on our greenway no more than 3 to 5 times. And the primary reason I run on the Shelbyville Highway as opposed to our greenways is because of our ban on guns with carry permit holders. I do not, as a councilman, I don't feel safe in certain areas of the greenway running early in the morning or later in the evening. And Eddie's exactly right. Those who are carry permit holders that have gone to the trouble of getting that carry permit are not going to take lightly the responsibility that comes with having that permit. Our state parks allow those permit holders to carry their weapons into those state parks. And if the state legislature deems that appropriate, I don't see why we should look any differently at that. I've spoken to law enforcement officers. I've spoken to ministers, to members of the community who all feel the same way about that. When I go into the Fleet Feet store for equipment for running, that is the number one request I get out of customers and people that work in that store both. The thing lacking in our greenway is the fact that those that are carry permit holders are not allowed to carry weapons with them when they run. And for those of you who worry about folks walking around that may have a gun on them or not, every time that the majority of any of you all have ever seen me out on the street or come into my office or seen me anywhere where a gun's allowed, whether you know it or not, there's probably been a gun on my person at the time. And I don't think any of you have ever felt unsafe being around me.
Speak for yourself, Toby.
Well, one thing I'll mention something here is, and I, in principle, agree with a lot of this. The part that I'm having trouble with is this. The way I understand this would be a resolution we vote on at one time and it's in place. It's not like there's a second and third hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, the statute said you're to do it by resolution, and that just takes one vote.
Okay, so the part that I'm sort of struggling with is maybe 2 parts, but I guess the main thing is, first of all, my first reaction right now to what I just heard is I think I'd rather see the map first to know sort of, first of all, all right, how are we going to designate? And I mean, I agree that, there's going to be some areas. I mean, I think there's probably more areas that are more sensitive than other areas. And Kids Castle might be a good example of that. But I don't know how to handle this, but I don't think I'd be prepared to just say, well, we're going to say it's so, and we'll work out the details later on, especially on an issue that's this sensitive with so many of our residents, and having basically no time. It's no secret. Last night, when I read the agenda Tuesday night, by reading what I read here, I would never expected that we'd be voting on something tonight. I literally learned it last night from Scott Broden that there was an expected vote tonight. So, I figured we'd be discussing this. They'd go into a fairly timely process and to get some citizen feedback, to get some feedback from our committees, and then have maps drawn that we could look at it. We could look at what the resolution says and make sure it's legal, perfect, and then vote. So to me, that's kind of where I'm feeling.
That's where, and I hope the council, what my point was at the first, I can't say whether you're for or against something if we don't see. I mean, we're basically like talking about, hey, we're thinking about annexing the south side of a certain area, but we're showing no map on what we're annexing. We're just going to give a vote to say, well, we think we would want to go out there and annex. And just as principle, I don't think, in my opinion, and I'm not feel comfortable voting for anything if we don't have details. We're basically, there's no details. There's not even an ordinance in front of us. That's the part I don't feel comfortable with. I don't like voting for anything that I don't know what I'm voting for.
Well, you wouldn't be able to do it in binding effect tonight because you would have to have a resolution in front of you.
Sure.
There's no resolution in front of you. You could vote to direct staff to prepare one, but the definitive thing would be the resolution itself. If you decided not to send it to the citizen board, or if you wanted staff to do it, but you would need a resolution to take effective action.
Sure.
I would like to make a motion that the staff write a resolution requesting that guns be permitted on the Greenway and on the Greenway and trailhead systems only. I would also like for them to make clear what areas we consider Greenway, and that would not include any part of the trail that would extend into Kids Castle, Cannonsburg, and maybe a couple of other exceptions. But would present with us within that ordinance a map showing which areas would be appropriate and considered. And I'll be glad to work with you on the resolution if that's possible.
Sorry. Okay.
And I'll finish by saying that the Second Amendment says, of our Constitution, says that we have the right to keep and bear arms, and it shall not be infringed.
Mr. Gilley.
Thank you, Mayor. And Eddie, let me make this suggestion. What if we task them with your vote to just simply say that it covers the 13 miles of the Greenway and the trailheads, but you cannot get off of that trailhead into one of the park areas, and that be the map, because our Parks and Rec Department can show us a map of what they consider, as Madeline said, the 13 miles of the Greenway and the trailheads.
And that's my intentions. I wanted to include all the Greenway system, with the exceptions of when the Greenway system goes into a specific area where we would deem inappropriate. And I'll be glad to tell you what is inappropriate in a meeting and include that in the resolution. But when if you're going to write the resolution, I'd like to be involved in the writing of the resolution, I guess is my point.
Councilman, I'll do what the council instructs, but generally individual councilmen don't get involved in that sort of thing. Staff would come back with a recommendation, and the council as a whole would decide what they wanted or didn't like about what staff had brought back to them. Certainly, if the council wants to do it that way, I'm not raising personal opposition. I'm just saying we don't generally do it that way.
Well, I think it'd be a violation of the Sunshine Law, I guess, if more than one of us was there, and I guess that's the reason I don't want us to have a group meeting.
I wasn't suggesting a group meeting. I was suggesting it would come back to the council as a whole if, the staff recommendation or staff interpretation of whatever motion the council passes would come back to the council as a whole, rather than be the individual preference of a single councilman.
Will we be presented with the resolution and have time to contact the staff for any changes that might be done before we present it?
Certainly, staff would be available for interaction, but the changes would come at the council, this meeting, rather than in advance of the council meeting.
Okay.
We can hammer those out, and I'll second your motion in that regard then.
I still have comments.
Okay, so we have a motion. We still have Ms. Skels Harris.
To me, it still doesn't make sense. Number one, in 2009, the council voted, I wasn't on the council, no guns in the park. And we're talking about tonight allowing guns on the Greenway in certain areas. And I'm still going back to what I said. Either we're going to have guns on the Greenway or no guns on the Greenway. No guns on the Greenway in certain areas, guns or no guns. And people go to parks and greenways, and, it's set aside for a safe haven for people who want to go and gather their thoughts, maybe be with the kids. And as far as guns are concerned, I bet you right now 5 people in here have a gun. I guarantee you 5 people in here have a gun. So we know people have guns. And in a place like on a greenway, if someone approaches me on a greenway with a gun, they already have an advantage over me because they already have in their thought what they're going to do. So they have an advantage over me without a gun. Sometimes I think people react to guns irrationally. And for the fear of people accidentally shoot people, not only the victim they are out to rob or rape or whatever, but it's the people that are also around the area that get shot that we have to think about are either injured. Also, people that carry guns, is a fact, they shoot themselves accidentally. I'm just not for that. But let's talk about another issue. You said, Mr. Smotherman, people have permits to carry guns. Okay, that's good, as opposed to a trained police officer. And I don't know if I'm out of place, if I can call and ask Chief Chrisman a question. Am I out of the line to do that? Can I ask Chief Chrisman a question?
I would think that would be acceptable.
Okay, Chief Chrisman, do you mind coming to the podium, please?
Yes, ma'am.
As a police officer, when we hire a police officer, what type of training do they go through to carry a gun?
With regard to firearms?
Firearms, yes.
They are obviously required to attend probably at least 40 hours of firearms training in the basic police school curriculum. In addition to the better part of another 40 hours, I would say, locally here, when they go through their orientation process as new employees. And then in addition to that, outside of just the normal firearms training that they would get in both of those environments, clearly they have a good deal of training that deals with use of force, that deals with constitutional issues surrounding arrest, search and seizure, and those other things that often are a part of any use of force situation or can be a part of that. So it's considerable training. I would think on an average, most police officers through the basic police school or through an orientation class are going to shoot several hundred rounds, if not perhaps as many as 1,000 rounds, and that's just a guesstimate.
Okay, so I'm hearing you saying a minimum of 80 hours, roughly, of training with the firearm. Okay, now, once an officer has that training, are they required during the year, like quarterly or annually, also refresher courses on the use of handguns?
Yes, ma'am. As it currently stands, Our goal is to have them qualify quarterly. We've had some problems this fiscal year with that, this calendar year with that, because of ammunition shortages. But typically, we like for them to qualify quarterly with their service weapon. And then they also are required to attend 8 hours of firearms training annually as a part of their in-service training curriculum, where they certify and requalify with their firearm. The other thing that factors into that somewhat now is the active shooter training that we do, and a good deal of that involves the use of simunitions, which is practice rounds, but it's very helpful in our active shooter training.
Okay, so I'm listening to you say a new officer. We're talking about training to use a handgun. Approximately 8 hours when they start. They go back, they're required quarterly to go back and get a refresher course, and annually. Okay, now, your retired police officers, are there any requirements for your retired police officers to actually keep their permit to carry a gun? Do they have to come back for training, or do they have to come in for anything?
They do. If they want to maintain a retired officer's status, then there is subsequent training and qualification that they have to achieve after they retire, and some elect to do that. Some, by that time, may have become handgun permit holders and may rely on their handgun permits for that in the alternative.
Okay, thank you, Chief Chrisman. Okay, the point I'm trying to make here.
Chief,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Councilman Gilly.
Go ahead and finish if you'd like to.
No, I'm finished with him.
Councilman Gilly.
Chief Chrisman, is it fair to say that virtually 100% of the crimes that you and your department investigates involving firearms are with individuals who don't have a right to have that firearm or are not a permit holder to start with?
Crimes involving firearms?
Firearms are not individuals with permits.
That's probably fair to say.
It's not the permit holders that your department has to worry about. It's the non-permit holders with guns.
That's probably fair to say.
Is it easy enough to prepare that report? I mean, to kind of look into that and let us know, like we had the other list of the number of calls on the Greenway. Is there some kind of report like that would say there's X amount of offenses via,
That's actually very simple. If you commit a crime using a firearm and you've got a permit, your permit's gone.
And we see that. Can you try to put that together?
I'll be
for us?
glad to try to assemble whatever information the council wants. If it's a matter if it's available or not, Mr. Lawrence.
Chief, I know you.
We'll get it for you.
I'm sorry. You finished?
Yes, sir.
I think it's irrelevant, the number of crimes that have happened on the Greenway. It has nothing to do with it. I'm looking at this from a constitutional standpoint. Am I asking for anything that is not permitted by a gun hand permit holder that they could do on the public square tonight? Could they not walk around the public square with a handgun carry permit and be completely legal?
There's nothing that I know of, Mr. Smotherman, that would prohibit that. Ms. McGannon may want to opine on that. I know of nothing that would prohibit it.
Could they not, as a legal handgun carry permit holder, walk around any neighborhood or any sidewalk in the city of Murfreesboro, except when they were going on school property or something, not do the very same thing with their handgun, carry a concealed weapon, and walk through their neighborhood tonight without being in violation of the law?
With the exceptions that are set forth, some of which you've mentioned,
right.
No, sir.
So we're not really asking for anything that would be any different than anywhere in Murfreesboro, with the exception of the gun-safe zones or gun-free zones, which we would consider our schools and our parks and that type of thing. What we're asking for is nothing different than a handgun carry permit holder to be able to walk freely with their gun down the Greenway system.
No, sir, other than the exemptions imposed by the council.
Thank you.
And to put that in further perspective, our farmers market on Saturday morning, you're free to walk around if you've got a carry permit.
And to put that in more further perspective too, the point I'm trying to make is when we're talking about a gun, period. That's what we're talking about. Who can carry a gun and who's. We're dealing with assumptions here. A person that has a handgun permit goes through 1 day of training, a half a day they're in the classroom talking about the guns, the other half of the day they're out shooting the gun. They take a test. If they pass that, they get their permit. No training, as opposed to a trained officer with a gun, 100-plus hours, have to come back quarterly to get a refresher course. Even a retired officer has to come back and get a refresher if he wants his permit, as opposed to someone who goes through the class one day, gets a gun permit, no training on various situations, and they can renew their certificate. They have 6 months once it expires to renew it. If they don't renew it within that 6 months, then they have to take the course over. But in order to renew that certificate, they don't have to go through anything. Just file for the state to renew it. So I'm looking at a trained person with a gun and a person with no training. And then we're going to put those people on the Greenway with a gun. I'm not for it.
Chief Chrisman, you understand and are aware that people who have handgun carry permits have gone through a background check, correct?
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
You do also understand that they've been fingerprinted and everything about them has been checked out to make sure that they meet all the criteria that our government requires in order to get that handgun carry permit.
They would have to meet those eligibility requirements, yes, sir.
And that during trying to acquire that handgun permit, they probably have practiced firing their handgun because they have to score a certain rating in order to get the handgun permit. You can't just shoot bullets all over the place and say, okay, I fired X number of rounds and I've qualified. You do fire at a target and you are graded on your score.
70%. 70%. That fires, they have to hit 70% of the goal target.
Mr. Young.
One of the things that's made this community strong is our committee system. We have a strong Parks and Recreation Committee that has 2 council members on there. We have a Greenway Committee that recommends ideas to make our greenways better, safer, more marketable, merchandising, and consumer friendly. And we're going to ignore any input from these 2 committees if we vote tonight on this. I don't think that's right.
Well, this is a passionate issue, and I think that's whether you're for or against it. But the thing I will say, I'm in the line of work I'm in. It's all about the details, and I can't have a project or build something if I don't have a plan. And I'm not going to support anything, whether it's guns in greenways or it's an annexation or it's anything on a premise and not have the details.
And that's what the motion is asking for the city attorney to prepare for us, is that plan?
All we're asking is for the details.
But I think part of those details, we have a process in place that we have a Greenway Commission, and that's all they deal with greenways. They know every inch of that greenway. They know the parks at the greenways. They know where trailheads, where different things are. We have a Parks and Recreation Commission that all they do is deal with parks and recreation issues. And as a council, we're saying we don't care about, in my opinion, if I vote for that, I'm saying, well, I don't care about your citizen board or your comments. We're just going to make the decision for you. And I don't think that's the way we're set up. At least that's the years I've been up here. We've always taken into account what our boards and commissions think. And I'm not going to bypass that process. At least that's not what I'm going to vote to do.
I respect that. But the only question I'm still confused about, even with that, we can have guns on the greenway in certain areas is what we're asking them. If we draw maps, there's going to be certain areas on that greenway. A gun can be in certain areas that can't be, right? Is that what we're saying? If the board...
Possible.
Possible. So...
But we don't, I think that's the thing, Ms. Scales-Harris, we don't, everything that we're talking about right now is conjecture. We've got different ideas, but we don't have anything concrete in front of us.
Okay.
So that's just my personal opinion. We've got experts with different, we've got a Greenway master plan that the Greenway that we just voted on 14, 16 months ago, and that greenway goes through Siegel Park, it goes through the soccer complex, it goes through Barfield. We've got a master plan that we're saying where we think it's going to go, and the group that worked to recommend that to us, we are saying, my thought.
Oh, I'm okay with letting
by not letting them look at it, we're saying we'll make the decision on that.
But I'm going to have to opt out because I'm on the committee.
Well, I'm going to tell you that I agree with Shane. I feel like there's going to be a bunch of questions about this. This is a 2-day process at this point. I mean, from the time the agenda came out till now. I mean, the questions, I started right now a list of questions of the people that started emailing me today and things that I thought were valid. And I'll tell you something right now. I've heard one of the people up here who probably should be fairly knowledgeable about this already mentioned the word concealed. Well, this is not concealed. There is no way for us to make it concealed, as from what I'm understanding. So it's different if you say, we think it should be okay if you're out there on the greenway with a concealed weapon, because that's not going to be. We can't say that from my understanding. Can you clarify whether or not we can?
I don't think we've got that distinction.
A Tennessee handgun carry permit is a handgun carry permit.
That's right.
It does not designate concealed.
That's right.
However, in the training process, you have been trained, if you have a handgun carry permit, that you do not want to become the target. And in order to prevent yourself from becoming that target, you keep your weapon concealed so that nobody knows you have it, because otherwise you have given up any element of surprise that you might have over a criminal.
I'm all for concealed. So I'll tell you that I think it's the smart way. I'm a handgun carry permit holder myself. Certainly concealed is my preference, but my point is just to make sure, to give some reasoning, kind of especially some reasoning behind the idea of this filtering through what I think would be the appropriate process of going through some of our committees to get some of this stuff knocked out where we know exactly what it is we're dealing with. I mean, I got a question today, which I think is a real valid question. I don't know the answer to it, but, is this just for handguns? Does it apply? I mean, so does this mean somebody could walk around with an AK-47 is like the perfect example?
That's not a handgun.
I know it's not. I realize it's not a handgun, Eddie, but so my question is, this is for handgun carry permits only, but that would be the type of thing we need to make sure is outlined very clearly before we get into a spot where we're voting on it. That's my opinion on it, because it opens the door to so many questions and misperceptions and misconceptions that we can clear up.
And I'm going to respect the vote of the council. Everyone knows how I feel about it. But my last question I'm going to propose to us is, where do we stop? I mean, really, where do we stop? Will it next be coming to us where we're giving principals, teachers, janitors guns to protect our children? With the gun situation, where do we stop? That's my last comment.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor to ask staff to create an ordinance.
Resolution.
A resolution. Do we have any more discussion?
I'm going to make a comment. I respect, it's been really, really good dialogue. Really, really good, and I respect the gun carry permit council persons and anybody else have the right to bear arms. I'm not against it, but I'm just not a guns person. So I'm going to vote no on this bad boy. To me, it's just, Manley made a whole lot of good points. Ms. Scales Harris did, and I am where I am, and until somebody proves to be a little different or convinces me differently, open that door up like Brother Lance is talking about, don't count on me. But I'm just one vote.
So let me ask a question then. The idea of going through the process, is this vote, if we ask for this vote, I'm sorry, reverb maybe for this, if we vote to accept this resolution or this, whatever we're voting on right now, to have you draw up a resolution, is that going to include going through the channels?
it doesn't, as the motion was made, the motion as made, as I understood it, would be to direct me in consultation with other staff members.
Other staff, and that would include Parks and Recreation and the Police Department and anybody in that staff that you would like to discuss it with.
But not the Parks and Recreation Commission or the Greenway Committee. That was not part of the motion. So if the motion is adopted, that would not be part of the process, was my understanding.
So what we're voting on is just a resolution for staff members to come back and present to the council.
A recommendation.
A resolution. Yeah, it would be a resolution for us to vote on.
Right.
So not going to the Greenway Committee or the Greenway or the Parks and Recreation Commission. It would just be our decision. Okay, Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
No, I'm sorry.
Mr. LaLance?
No.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Mr. Washington?
Nope.
Vice Mayor Young?
No.
Mayor McFarland?
No. Okay, we'll move to beer permits. Excuse me, I hear from the city attorney with regards to Resolution 14R23.
Mayor and Council, this resolution would further implement the authority that you have to allow staff to delegate certain functions. What you did in recognition of the volume of work that the city has to deal with on financial matters in passing Resolution 11R15, a copy of which was attached to my cover letter, was to authorize the city manager to do various things and said certain things that he didn't have to personally see. This resolution would expand that authority in two respects. You previously decided that the city manager did not have to specifically approve the payroll register if it had been approved by the city recorder and the human resources director. We're asking for authority to do two things: to expand that payroll registry approval to include the assistant human resources director, because she does serve on a payroll function. And the second thing would be to make clear that the city manager doesn't have to see all of the things that are part of making payroll. You have deductions going for voluntary life insurance premiums. Those are contracts that you all have approved, and these are just routine payments. And so it's saying that these routine payments that relate to compensation to employees do not have to be seen by the city manager for approval, but can be approved as an alternative by the city recorder and either the human resources director or the assistant human resources director. The second change is a similar combination of people, but speaks not to the payroll issue, but to the insurance fund. As you know, the city provides a self-funded medical benefit, health insurance, whatever term you want to use, fund to cover these ongoing medical bills, and we want the alternative to the city manager. Previously, you'd said only the city manager could approve payments going out of the insurance fund, and so this would expand that authority and set up an alternative. It would also make clear that because the doctors and hospitals like to get paid when they bill, that we could make those payments on a weekly basis, even if the council has not met. Of course, all of these payments would be on the bills to be paid to you, that come to you, but that it would allow the city recorder to issue the payment even if council hasn't previously approved that bill. So these are housekeeping, if you will, in a sense of not making a drastic change in terms of what is being paid, but simply who has to pre-approve it before the funding is made. And this was something that city manager, city recorder, and the HR director and assistant director had asked that you do for the smooth functioning of our payments, so that payments are not delayed. And so that would be what passage of this resolution would accomplish, and I or any of the officials whose workload would be affected would be glad to speak to the need for this.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll consider adopting Resolution 14R23 regarding payment approvals by modifying Resolution 11R15.
So moved. Second.
And this is just paying the bills in a timely manner. Do you know if there's any situations where we're being penalized or we're making late payments because we're not doing this?
I don't know of any. It's to clearly authorize that, what we've in fact been doing, that we brought the health insurance issue to you. So we've been avoiding penalties by trying to get those paid promptly. But because the language in the resolution you had before wasn't as broad as we needed it to be, that we're bringing it back to you.
Mr. Smotherman, you like to make motions on paying the bills?
We better vote on this last motion first.
Would you,
I will do that. Yeah, I'll be glad to.
well, do we have a motion?
Hey, the motion was there a second?
Second.
We've already got a motion and a second on the floor.
All right. Ms. Wright will call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
All right, yes. Beer permits.
Mayor, we have two tonight. They're both special event permits, one for the Rutherford County Primary Care event on September 6th, and one for the Middle Tennessee Museum of Natural History on September 21st. And those are both in order, and we recommend their approval.
Okay. Does council have any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright will call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Mr. Smotherman, we have statements that need to be paid.
And I would like to make the motion that we pay the bills.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright will call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We have boarding commission appointments. You have one on your desk from Mr. Lyons.
Yes. As you know, I've got one boarding commission that state law requires the city manager to make appointments to, and it is my recommendation that Mr. Richard Stone be appointed to the Power Board to fill the seat previously held by Dr. Jim Burton.
So moved.
Second.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Once our council member, Toby Gilly, leaves our council and is currently serving on the Power Board, obviously he will not be the council representative, but are we filling a space that might be available for him should he be appointed to the Power Board, and does he have the ability to serve on the Power Board as a judge?
That's sort of a complicated question, Councilman Smotherman. What I've checked with the Administrative Office of the Courts, while I cannot serve on a purely governmental board, if the Power Board, what I've been told, is deemed a quasi-governmental entity, then I would be allowed to serve as a citizen on that board. At least that's what I was told by my contact with the Administrative Office of the Courts.
And I'm not trying to change who we're suggesting here by any means, but I'm saying if there is a opening that would come forward at some point. Ms. McGannon, you're wanting to say something.
I am. I don't know who Mr. Gilly spoke with, but I doubt they're familiar with the distinctions between municipal power boards and other kinds of power boards. I'm not willing to say that my client, MED, is quasi-governmental. It's governmental.
Okay. Well, if everybody comes to agreement that he qualifies, I would like to see him considered for the next opening that comes up on a board, if that is permittable. If it's not permittable, then sorry, Toby, go home.
And as y'all know, Mr. Lyons, by state statute, has to make these appointments. So, and I think Mr. Lyons would be happy to give this to the.
I tried to give it up.
Yeah. So. We appreciate you giving us the recommendation.
We've got a motion to second.
All right. Ms. Wright, we'll call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Young.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. I do have one that We had a gentleman who served for quite some time on the, Mr. Lyons, if you'll tell who we're losing on our pension commission.
Yes, Mike Gower is retiring after many, many years of service at MTSU. He is going to be leaving our community and moving to a house near a lake. So we're sorry to lose Mr. Gower, but we are going to have a vacancy on the pension committee.
The pension committee will meet sometime in September, so waiting for the application, but I wanted to let you know we'll email that this upcoming. But Earl Hull has submitted that he would like to serve on the pension commission. So I'll make sure that as soon as we get that. But I just wanted to notify you so that way, if we had to do that a little quicker than what we've said on the 2-week notice, that you guys would know that. Other business from staff of the City Council? I have one item I wanted to get the council's opinion on. As you know, normally second, third week of September, we will send out the city manager evaluation. And Mr. Lance, this is how every year we will give the city manager feedback.
You want me to give it?
Sure. So,
you want me to give it?
There had been some discussion in the past about maybe looking at revising that form, and was reading through some information, and I wanted to sort of see what the council thought. But we're doing our comp class and study right now with MAG, and it seems that if the council still would like to lean to the direction to let someone look at that form, see if it needs refreshed, maybe give some feedback, now would be the time to ask our consultants to do that. It's going to we would need to ask them how much the cost is to be able to look at that, but I think it may be something that, at least from council members, have shown interest in that. I wanted to see what your thoughts were before I asked them to do that.
Mayor McFarland, in your business and my business, we often do things that we don't get paid for. I would suggest that MAG look at the compensation package for the city manager and not charge us.
All right.
Good luck with that.
Okay.
Make them tell you no.
Mr. Young,
I don't know if I could be a form of a motion or not, but
okay.
You're pretty adamant.
I don't even know what just happened.
Can we just go home, man? Let me have that gavel.
He hasn't had his medicine.
Does everyone, would you like to see the form looked at, or what would you like? And Mr. Young, if there is a cost to it, obviously that would come back to the council, but
it won't come out of your pocket.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not.
Sure.
Okay.
It's happening.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, well, we'll work on that tomorrow. All right. Any other business from the council? I forgot one last thing. As y'all know, Councilman Gilley has won his election, and so congratulations. We're very proud of you. But
Thank you. I've got one more week with you.
yeah, but we will meet next week, and I think we have a special meeting on Wednesday, and then we will have a meeting on Thursday, and I think that you will get something that will be in your box about maybe having a pre-reception for Mr. Gilley before the council meeting. And so I wanted to publicly say that, so if any constituents and residents want to come out and give Mr. Gilley a farewell and a thank you, I think that would be more appropriate to do something like that. So we want to let everybody know that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, Mayor, the special council meeting will be 4 p.m. on Wednesday, and that'll be second reading on the certified tax rate correction.
Okay.
And that'll also be Mr. Lance's birthday.
She did not miss a leg. No, she didn't.
All right. Well, with that, we will stand adjourned.